all the blood I've drawn over the last 32 years of growing roses. And I have to say, the person that gave me the disease for plants is here. My 7th grade science teacher is here somewhere in the room. Mrs. Morgan, where are you?
Over here.
She made me draw LOD leaves, which I think I was quite good at. It obviously left an impression on me. I'm from a large Irish-Italian family, and we were Catholic until my oldest brother got slapped by a nun, and we became Protestant that very day. And that's sort of sent the elders in our family on both sides into a little bit of a tizzy. And then my dad took on a job as a caretaker of our local synagogue, so we became sort of Jewish by assimilation. And you can imagine the joy that spread through the elders when they heard that I became a Rosarian. We found a letter that my great Aunt Helen on the Irish side, my Aunt Helen was someone who clutched her rosaries close to her heart whenever me and my 6 brothers would show up. And she wore one of those dead animals around her neck with the tail that was caught in its mouth. And quite often the tail and the mouth would be facing us in the back seat of the car to keep us under control. Well, she wrote a letter and she was just so pleased. In her letter she said, "I'm so pleased that one of those boys became a Rosarian." So, Aunt Helen, this is for you. So with that, I ask you to open your hymnals on the table. And in the center of the program are several roses I've selected that are my favorites for the moment. And they're roses that have survived in our gardens without any extra, no spraying, without any extra work except for good pruning and knowledgeable work of the soil, making the soil healthy for the roses. And that's what sustainability is all about. But sustainability also involves selecting roses that are important for passing on the genes for disease resistance and fragrance. And I'm starting to do that by putting some very interesting roses in our collection. And one of the roses, I know my bosses are scratching their heads over this one, but it's a tiny little red rose. It's in your notes. It's called Belfield, and it was found growing against a slave cottage in Bermuda. And I meant to point it out tonight, but you probably didn't see it. It's so tiny, it's hidden under all the euphorbia. But that little red rose, we think, is the rose that was once brought to England in 1790 and used as the parent for the next generation of red roses. In fact, every red rose today can be traced back to that rather insignificant looking rose.
Oh my.
And we are the only botanic garden that I know of that's growing that rose now. And a little bit of history, in 1800, that rose was sold for $1 a pot out of a nursery that is now Astor Place in Manhattan. And he did so well. His name was Michael Floyd, that he opened a nursery in Hoboken just for that rose. So we have it. It's back home where it belongs. And that's one of the many roses that we find growing in wayside gardens. We find them in abandoned gardens or in old cemeteries, uncared for and doing just fine. So those are the roses that we want to use for breeding. And the breeders do come to me looking for these roses for their new breeding program. And others like that, there's this Caldwell Pink, which is in the program. It's a rose found in Caldwell, Texas by Texas rose rustlers. And little old ladies who ride horses through town with whips, and they look for roses that are being mistreated. They do exist, yes. And we have those roses in our garden now too. And there's other roses like Maggie, found in Maggie's garden in Louisiana. And there's a rose called the red burglar rose, a rose that snared a burglar as he jumped out of a second-story window and couldn't get away. We don't know what that rose really is, but the names are great. Rose names has become my passion, Sally. And I was just intrigued by the number of celebrities that have roses. Julie has a rose named for her, and John Wayne had one. But his publicist wasn't very pleased with the description. It was described as having a fruity fragrance. Rose breeders learned quickly to stay away from politicians, especially after the highly praised President Herbert Hoover rose was pulled out of the gardens as soon as the economy started to fail. I have a friend whose grandmother grew the President Herbert Hoover. She was a staunch Republican in a Democratic family, and she wanted her family members to pass her President Herbert Hoover roses every day in California. Until the economy went downhill, she still loved her rose, so she simply changed the name to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. And speaking of Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt supposedly, we haven't quite proven this yet, but it's on the internet, so it's got to be true. Eleanor Roosevelt supposedly said, you know, there's a rose named for me, but I'm not very pleased with its description. Eleanor Roosevelt, not very good in a bed. Do I still have a job? Much better up against the wall. Oh, Aunt Helen. Empress Josephine made roses fun. She bought roses. She had roses sent to her from England during the height of Napoleonic Wars. And one of my favorites from her collection was La Cuisse de Nymphe Aimée. She got it from England as Rosa Alba Incarnata. And she knew that that rose wasn't going to be a favorite in her salon, so she changed it to La Cuisse de Nymphe. La Cuisse, I got it all on. Translated, it means the blushing thigh of an aroused nymph. She kept the second list, bee names for her roses, for her inner circle. And that same rose was the virgin with the shiny ovaries. It's a great rose for the coldest climates. It's incredibly fragrant, too. One rose we recently added, and Julie, I'm totally going to forget your last name, is Sacculariatus. Oh my gosh, she gave it to me. It's a rose called the Shipwreck Rose from the Hamptons. In 1842, an April morning, on Mecox Beach, a ship ran aground, and to save it from being destroyed, they threw all its cargo overboard. It was mostly plants, champagne, and furniture. Today, people in Sag Harbor proudly claim they have the Shipwreck Rose. No one ever discusses the champagne or the antiques. But this Shipwreck Rose, there is one plant in a garden across from the bookstore in Sag Harbor, where the woman who got it got it from her grandfather, who was on the beach that morning. And Julie, Sacculariatus, has the same rose, and Julie and the woman from Sag Harbor got together over a bottle of wine and discovered that their roses are identical. So we have both those plants now in the garden as the Shipwreck Rose. We don't know what it really is, we never know, it's just fine with that name. But in more modern times, a few scandals, and one I'm responsible for and one that I'm not responsible for, but I'm glad to have it in my hands. There's a new rose called Doris Day. You know, I had students from the Hort program with me, and I was telling them all about Doris Day, and not one of them knew who I was talking about. Except one of them said, oh, she's that crazy lady I heard about NPR who bought a house just for stray dogs. So, well, I did 8 bars of Que Sera Sera, and they were still. So anyway, I like Doris Day because she has 2 very unique parents. All roses have a mother and a father. And Doris Day's mother is Julie Newmar. And forget trying to explain who Julie Newmar is. I said, Catwoman. No, it's Halle Berry. No, the original Catwoman. And the father. Now this rose will never grow in middle America, as the father was Julia Child. Doris Day is the product of her and her marriage. How's that for a scandalous rose? And in closing, before Aunt Helen turns that fur and bites me with her animal, I was good friends with Nigel Hawthorne, a British actor, and at about the time he was nominated for his Oscar for his role in The Madness of King George, we were in his garden in Hertfordshire, and he wanted me to identify his roses. So I brought my pink landscape tape and my Sharpie, and I was writing all these names on the tape. And he was having a good old time, and Nigel had a sharp sense of humor. And he came to one which I recognized immediately as Frau Dagmar Hartop, a Robusta rose.
And he told me the name he thought it was.
So I wrote it down, his name, on the tape, very clearly in big letters, thinking I was going to come back shortly and put real labels out there. And just, well, I didn't get back until a year later, where he had already had the Great Oak Foundation and garden, all kinds of garden conservancies come, and the royal family come through his garden, and they all got to see the rose that Nigel called Frau Dagmar's jockstrap. Well, you can see where this garden's going to be going soon. I can't thank you enough for welcoming me into this family, and I can't take credit for all that work out there. I have a great crew of gardeners and a wonderful crew of volunteers, and the previous curator did a great job of renovating the garden and turning it into a truly sustainable rose garden, and I'm very proud to carry on with this legacy and to make it more interesting. Thank you all for being here tonight.